Well, welcome to another episode of the More Than a Game podcast. And it's an exciting episode here today because we're expanding the podcast to not only focus on basketball, but also diving into other sporting codes and interviewing, hearing the stories of other sporting personalities, once again, to unearth key virtues around life or for life and leadership. And joining me on the podcast today is former NRL coach and best-selling author, Matthew Elliot. And Matt's background is in rugby league, as most of you probably know. He played 61 games for the St George Dragons, as they were known back then, and he's coached over 400 games across both the NRL and the English Super League as well. Just recently, he stepped more into the health and wellbeing space. He's very much started a movement, started a business, and written a book called The Change Room, which is sitting behind me, and we're going to dive into all of that here today. Matt Elliot, welcome to the More Than a Game podcast.
Yeah, pleasure to join you, Dan. I'm really looking forward to our chat today, mate.
Yeah, likewise, mate. It's good to have you on and good to again expand the podcast and talk about other sports, but we will obviously have the bias towards basketball. But let me start with this, the Matildas. I'm sure you've been getting on the bandwagon as many of the nation have. Have you seen in your time anything bigger than what's been happening with the Matildas in Australian sport?
No, it's so good to see that the whole nation got behind it, and like a lot of us aren't massive football fans, but I think it was more about the achievement against against the odds, really, and everyone loves an underdog in Australia, and I'm so proud of what those players were able to achieve on behalf of the nation, and you always. I know people talk about, that it's the growth of women's sport, but, I like to focus on the equity rather than the other side of the conversation. And it's just so good to see that those amazing athletes being acknowledged in the way that they deserve.
Yeah, well said, mate. Absolutely. It's been incredible to see. And they have a semi-final against England coming up as we speak. Fingers crossed. Hopefully they win it. It'd be great for the nation. But just want to start with your story because obviously your background's in rugby league, not basketball. We've had a few different sporting personalities, including Jamie Seld on the podcast. But I thought it'd be great just to expand the podcast just a little bit. But let's start with your career because you did play a number of games in the, New South Wales Rugby League, as it was known back then, and also coached extensively across the NRL. Where did it all begin for Matt Elliot? How did you get involved with the sport of rugby league?
Well, I grew up in Townsville, up in North Queensland, and I was very lucky. The area I grew up with, or the suburb I grew up with, was a little bit isolated, and I probably had about 20 boys of similar age to me, maybe 2 years either side, and that's what you did. We went and played touch footy every afternoon in what we call the spare allotment, and then during summer we played cricket. So that's about as complex as it is, Dan, is that it was just something that we did for fun. And sometimes we forget that, as we grow up or, mature or whatever you want to call it, we forget that it is fun. And we probably get too immersed in the competitive side of it. But, footy was always fun for me, something that I still, really enjoy watching.
Oh, that's great. And something I love to talk about on the podcast is taking the athletes or personalities back to where it all began in terms of their desire to make it as a professional athlete. And if I can take you back to there, because I remember having a conversation with a Dragons player just at a fan day one day and just saying, it was my dream to be a professional basketball player. Here you are living out your dream, and just put it in perspective for them, like to enjoy it, as you said, because you can get worked up in terms of the competitive nature of it. But did you ever think, going back to when you were growing up, that you would have the career that you've had so far?
I shouldn't give away the title of the next book, but it's going to be a life by accident. No. Yeah. I was probably a better cricketer as a kid, played state cricket and came through and played a lot of first grade cricket. I always loved footy. So it wasn't, certainly a definitive mindset of mine as I wanted to come to Sydney and play rugby league. I was really lucky that rugby league got me through university in Lismore, sort of paid my way. So when I got to Sydney, I was playing first grade cricket and just signed for the Sydney Roosters, got called up. But yeah, ultimately the reason I played footy over cricket is I had to pay to play first grade cricket, and I got paid to play under 23s cricket. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're 19, or 19, 20, that's sort of shaped the way that my approach to footy. So I didn't really consciously go. I loved them both. I wanted to play both, and I did play both. I think I was probably one of the last to play first grade cricket and first grade rugby league in the same year, but that obviously wasn't a sustainable thing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you took the rugby league path. It's been great to see you coaching and doing your thing. But a big part of why I've asked you on here is obviously to speak about your book and talk about the change room and some of the areas of the health and wellbeing space you've been moving into. And we'll talk a bit about that in just a moment. I'm just interested to know how much of this area of the health and wellbeing space came out of your, I guess, experiences and your learning experiences playing at the highest level.
Yeah, a lot. My academic background's in sports science, and obviously as an athlete and then as a coach, we tend to stereotype rugby league people, don't we? And as much as I can say I've got a degree, I still saw myself as a rugby league person. My identity was attached to it. So the word dribbler was something that I was certainly aware of as far as the descriptions of us. I had my own challenges right at the back end of my coaching career with my health, both physically and mentally. And what I learned was there's a word called high performance that is attached to elite sport. And it's a bit of a trick word, Dan, because high performance, if something works for an athlete, guess what? It'll work for you. And the other thing about elite sport is you've got to use leading edge, not cutting edge, but leading edge approach. If you don't, you come last. So I guess I came out of sport and looked at the challenges I was facing. And while I respected the clinical approach to it, it wasn't working for me. So I needed to come up with actually some understanding. And what I found was a lot of the stuff that I learned in sport about developing relationships, about how to repair and recover your body, still operated for me as a 50-odd-year-old person. So that's where it came from. And I was lucky enough to meet someone like Anthony Minicello, who I majored in nutrition in sports science, and I thought I knew about it. And Anthony saw I was experiencing some discomfort. I had an autoimmune disease called PMR, which I'm polymolecular rheumatia. I think that's how you say it properly. But and I was having to inject myself with a steroid twice a day because of the pain, and it wasn't. And Anthony didn't know, but he picked up on it, and he suggested that I examine another type of diet. And I was sitting there going, mate, I know about diet, but that was again a couple of learnings out of that was one, to never say I know again, and the other part of that was to listen, and I went away and looked, and so there's just one example where that healed. I know I can bring that autoimmune disease back if I like, but I don't have it anymore. They can't find it in me. But there were some other things, and then I sort of looked at that and went, okay, so the adversity that you're experiencing here and all this advice you've been given for a long time, maybe you should try and utilize it yourself. And I think that's the most powerful thing in the book, Dan. Sorry to waffle on with your response, is that I find the most powerful advice you can give to people or direction you can give to people, they already know. It's just really about reminding them that not only do you know this, you can actually do this. And if you implement it as a life practice, your health and well-being will elevate. So, that's kind of what led me into this pathway.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It was interesting reading your story in terms of, that situation with Anthony Minicello, going to see a speaker, and just how it took you on that journey to discovery, I guess. So one of the things I sort of picked up from your book is the importance of holistic well-being and health. I think sometimes we can be so focused on exercising and that being the be-all and end-all, but diet is such a big, as you're talking about, aspect of our health. So can you dive into that a little bit more about the importance of the right healthy eating habits? And I guess that's a big part of it. It's not just doing a diet for maybe a month or two, or it's about building habits and rhythms and routines into your life. So can you speak a bit about the importance of healthy eating as well?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things holistic's a great way of describing it, by the way, Dan. So food is important. It's really important. God, it's made so complicated these days. And it doesn't need to be. As a species, the first thing we need to know is that one of the reasons we're the best hunter-gatherer on the planet was we have diet variation. So you could get the healthiest plate of food in front of you now, and if you ate that healthy plate of food every night, eventually your body would adapt to it. You wouldn't extract the same level of health. So diet variation is a massive thing for humans. And occasionally we're allowed to be naughty. So if you could work off the 80-20 rule, that would be a really good way to. But the big thing, just to really simplify this, the most important thing with food is eat real food. The less processed food you eat. And look, the whole thing about feeding the planet, when they started the new approach to agriculture, was for really good reasons. They wanted to feed the whole planet, but the way that they started preserving food, the way that they started processing food ended up being very unhealthy for us. They didn't mean to do that, but now they know it's unhealthy for us and they're still doing it. So the shortcut for us all, I promise you, is just eat real food. So, how many ingredients in a steak?
That's right.
How many ingredients in a banana? So that, it doesn't matter if you're a vegetarian or whatever, the more, or a carnivore, the more real food that you can eat, the better it is for you. The more variety that you can have of eating that real food, the better it is for you. That would be my sole suggestion. Also, a lot of our food, to avoid having insects eating it and also to preserve it, is sprayed with stuff. I suggest you wash your food as much as possible or stay away from that, because it's not good for us. And I can go into all the science behind that and all the evidence behind it, but I think if I got an apple here and I sprayed it with Baygon and said, do you want a bite of it? You're probably not going to have a bite of it, are you?
That's right, yeah.
So maybe it's just worthwhile understanding that's not a great approach for us.
No, well said, mate. That's great. It's something I've really discovered too recently. I had a bout of kidney stones, which is not great for my age. And I know someone that you may have heard of, Ben Summit. He played for the Cronulla Sharks, and he's been big in this space with his business Living Lean. So shout out to Ben. And I had a 5-day detox where it was hard to do, but it just showed me the importance of, like, you just eat approved foods on the list, and it was all just, as you said, real food and in pureed form. But it just made me, coming out the other end, feeling so much more energetic, and it was just incredible to see. Just wanted to do a shout out to Ben in terms of that healthy eating as well. But something else you talk about that some people are maybe still not sure about is the art of mindfulness, or being mindful, I guess. And I'm not sure if you brought into place, but I remember the New Zealand Warriors really started to do that in the NRL. Was that you, or was that after your time?
Yeah, no, it was during my time there. I started meditation at Penrith. And this is why I always say about leading edge rather than cutting edge. At the time, it was completely woo-woo and out there, and I must say that the board of directors weren't real happy with me paying the money I was for a meditation person. Then I got a guy called Nam Baldwin, who was Mick Fanning's breathing coach, and he's not just a breathing coach, but that mindfulness is a really interesting thing, because it's been made woo-woo, right? Made a bit out there, but it's not. Whoever made sitting quietly with your eyes closed and just letting your brain shut down for a small amount of time, out there, was definitely they shouldn't be going at the meditation people. They should be going at those people.
Yeah.
I will say this, look, can I give you some bad news? Look, the biggest cause of death and disease on the planet now, it used to be trauma and infection, is now our perception of threat. So remembered threat's called depression, and imagined threat is called anxiety. And there's a whole range of severity there. That is the biggest cause of heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease. This is our perception of threat, not real threat,
Mm.
is is the biggest cause of it.
Mm.
And one of the things that by just shutting down your thinking for a while, that's one of the things that can help us.
Yeah.
Emotional regulation is another massive thing in that area. But again, so you understand what I'm saying there to be true, right? I'm not making it up. This is science.
Yeah.
So would it be easy to understand that the biggest cause of well-being on the planet could be remembered joy or imagined joy?
Mm.
Have a think about it when you're a kid.
Mm.
You spent your whole time imagining you're going to be the best basketball player in the world. Like, were you right? Probably not, but who cares? You didn't care when you were a kid, and, taking time to reflect on great things that have happened in your life. I could tell you about the hormonal outlet in your body as opposed to having adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol in your body, which are really good in short periods in real threat. But, I could tell you also what happens when you have oxytocin and serotonin going around your body and what happens to your digestive system and liver function. So it's been made inaccessible for us. And can I be cynical for one tick is that it's because it's free. To remember joy, to imagine something amazing is free. But it is easier to have the shits than it is to be happy.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is easier to sit on the lounge than it is to exercise.
Yeah.
It is easier to go to Macca's than to cook one of those great home-cooked meals. So we just got to choose the more challenging path sometimes to make sure that we do elevate our health and well-being.
Yeah. I think that speaks into society as well in terms of wanting the shortcuts or, the quickest way there. I think it's, as you said, it's caused this anxiety and we're just so fast-paced. And just on that, I read in your book, and it was really interesting, the importance, I believe, as well, of having a balanced lifestyle. So we can be so focused on work and we've got kids going on. For those who have families, it can be full on. But I was really encouraged by reading about Petro Civoniceva when you coached him at the Panthers and how he, not only was he great on the field, but great off it. Can you share a bit about how he was well-balanced in his way of life and lifestyle?
Yeah, and again, these simple examples are the most powerful. We always look for complexity in modern life, don't we?
That's right.
But Petro's diligence around his preparation, he was always the first to training and the last to leave.
Yeah.
And the reason he was last to leave is that as soon as they got off the field, he took time for the people that he was playing with, not to talk about strategy with them, but to ask them about how they're going, how their families were, and then away from training, again, his commitment to his family and the development of his kids, it not only elevated their well-being, it elevated his. We white Australian males like me with my hair colour tend to be scared of the word love. We are. Because if you love yourself, that was an insult when I grew up.
Yeah.
But Petro loved himself enough to give that to his children and the people that shared his space. And you could just brush past that. And I've done that so many times. Well, that's a good thing to do. But sometimes you got to go, hey, wait, are you taking time to do this? Are you placing enough importance on that to do this? Because look, you don't have to go to the gym all day, so you don't have to walk around in a state of love and joy and happiness all day. But you do have to take times consciously to move into those states if you want to elevate your well-being. If you want the hormones of health in your body, you got to, again, it'd be great if I was sitting in a state of love and joy right now in this. Oh, it's so great to be here, Ben. Like. You drive people. That's a peak state, for the people that you love in your life. But what I learned from Petro is if you don't make time for it, it won't show up. The rainbow's not going to hit you in the bum. You got to consciously do it on a daily basis. Now, I don't know if he consciously did it, but he just did it every day, and the impacts he had on other people were pretty amazing to experience, to be honest.
That's awesome. And I find too that, just going back to what you're talking about, in regards to with Petro and having well-balanced lives. I've lost my train of thought with that question, but we'll come back to that. I'm sure we'll come back. But just speaking around this stuff in terms of the average person who's at home. Well, that's what I was going to say. I remember. I knew it would.
Well done.
This stuff also helps with like life isn't always rosy. Like there is times where you're going to have hardship and challenges. And the key thing for me when you speak about this is that this stuff helps us, I believe, get through those challenging times and come out the side better people instead of, in conflict, relational conflict. I guess, ruining that relationship because you're not in a healthy state of mind. So how important is this stuff, do you believe, in terms of getting through those challenges and hardships when they do arise?
I always use physical analogies, Dan, when we discuss this, right? So if you're physically strong and fit, right, and you're out in a boat and the boat sinks, you're probably more likely to be able to swim those 5 kilometres into shore than someone who is obese. Yeah, does that make sense? It's easy, right? That's not a complicated thing. So if you can develop emotional capacities that allow you to access those peak states of, that I spoke about, love, joy, enthusiasm, inspiration, you're not walking around that state the whole time. But I know I can move into them quickly, not because I'm some sort of guru. I practice them. I consciously do it every day because I know what it's like not to be there. I know what it's like to be the obese person with 5Ks to swim in the water. With the emotional analogy is I just didn't have, I had a really high, a job I loved as a footy coach. This is when I was at the Warriors and I was in a bad place emotionally, but I just didn't have people talk about, resilience is about bouncing back to where you were. So, but if you're low and you're resilient, if you're low physically, your physical resilience is bouncing back to something that's not helpful. So I learned that you can consciously build emotional capacities like you can mental capacities. We become smarter by studying, right? You have to, and you get to draw on that knowledge. You don't go around telling everyone what you know all day. You get to use that knowledge as a resource when it's required.
Yeah.
And I had to work that out by myself. It should be something we all get told. I wish I was taught that when I was a kid. You have to, you're having fun now. You have to learn how to, work on that even better so that when you need it, when the dung hits the fan, you get the opportunity to have that resource. It's that simple for me.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. We could talk about this all day. And if you want to find out more, whoever's listening out there, you can grab a copy of the book, obviously. But last thing on this, I guess, for the average person, which is where I was going to before I lost my train of thought as well. Someone who's, as I said, work is full on, always stressed, got kids at home or family, trying to juggle that. That's just real life. That's the reality of it. For someone who feeling like they're low and their resilience level is quite low or their health is not great, what are some strategies they can employ, do you think, early on just to get or start building these habits and grow a healthier mindset and ultimately a healthier way of life?
Yeah, great question. We love to separate all this stuff out. We put physical and diet over here, and then we put emotional and mental over here. They're all connected, so But and I'm a supporter of seek support. I'm going, but the reality of it is, I always ask people this question, Dan. If you're getting a cleaner to your house, what do you do before the cleaner comes?
Tidy it up a bit, I guess.
You tidy up.
Yeah.
That's the rule. So most people aren't going to speak up when they're in challenge. And it's teaching kids to do that now is a really important thing. But people in our orbit, mate, they don't do it. So if we're relying on that to get people in a better space, we're going to keep getting the results we're getting. So I believe people like to clean up before. Ways that you can clean up, it's now finally scientifically validated that if you exercise, walk, move, swim, get out and spend time with people, that will improve your mental health. It's the best medicine for you. You have this internal pharmacy that if you can ignite it just through moving properly. Okay, it's now, no one can refute this.
Yeah.
So that'd be my first thing is that if you're in a bad place, get out and particularly in the morning, get 10 minutes of sun before 10. What happens? Why would you do that? Well, one, the first thing, it burns off the cortisol that woke you up in the morning. Cortisol's not a bad thing. It burns it off. It also, you get sun on your face. This is proven. If you do this for 3-week period, you do it 3 times a week, they've proven all your mental health markers will go up. 10 minutes of sun before 10. Because melatonin will be then started to be produced. That's the thing that puts us to sleep at nighttime. So we can improve our quality of sleep by doing that in the morning. Like, this is complicated and expensive, right? And that doesn't mean, and on an overcast day like it is here in Wollongong today, that doesn't mean go outside and do the same thing. Maybe don't stand in the rain, but just get some sun on your face, move around. If you do have the capacity to exercise, you don't have to, I've got a stereotype in my brain. I don't feel like I'd exercise unless I flog myself because I come from a sporting background. That's not necessarily healthy. Just load your body to its capacity, have a rest and load it again, and just go through some really, again, there's so many different types of exercise. Don't feel like you need to kill yourself doing it.
That's right.
And then eat real food. That would be the start to it. The other one is that, I've been to clinicians and spoke to clinicians, and it was so helpful because you're just talking to someone that's not judging you. But I've also got mentors and mates and friends that I feel comfortable talking to. So human connection is the biggest cause of longevity on the planet. There's places called blue zones. They went there, they ate well, but they didn't mind a wine and a bunger. They exercised. It was what they call this incidental exercise. But these areas, the highest concentration of centenarians, the biggest common denominator was connecting with other people. So we feel safe when we're around people that we care about or care about us. And that's the prime human need.
That's great, mate. All in the book if you want to grab a copy and grab it. It's great. But I want to move into the leadership space now, because you talk a bit about that in other areas, and jumped on the webinar you had talking about this stuff as well. But for those who may be leading people, maybe coaches, or in the corporate space as well, that's something you talk a lot about, and something we talk a lot about on the podcast as well. But something I saw you quote recently, which I was interested in, I think it came up on LinkedIn, that says, if you want to be an elite leader, it's not doing more. You've got to dump 80% of the stuff that's not useful. So my question in that regard is, what's the stuff that's not useful, and how does one dump it?
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, Dan, I have to learn through mistakes. Some people can learn. That's the two ways where they learn. Son, don't put your hand on the hot plate. I should have listened to my mum. So I'm one of those ones that put their hand on the hot plate. But I guess I felt to be being a good leader doesn't mean that you need to be the smartest person in the organisation. Being a good leader means that you actually care about the people that are in your charge. They feel safe around you. Again, that word safety. And they feel heard. So the reason of dropping the 80% is I used to think that, let me use my assistants, for example, is I used to feel like I used to have to screen all their work and make sure. No, they are my assistants. Show trust in them, show belief in them. Certainly you need to give them feedback after they've done their presentations or whatever. But I was spending so much time on their jobs. I was spending I've got a degree in sports science. So can you imagine the poor strength and conditioning coach? So the 20% I should have been spending that was most important to me was developing relationships with players, with the people, making them understand what they were capable of, making them understand the areas that perhaps they could, get most improvement from. And I know that's a strength of mine, but when you dilute, you've only got so much focus, right? When you dilute it in those 80% of the areas, that 20%, is like drinking the most weak cordial you've had in your life. It just doesn't have any impact on the people that you want to really make a difference to.
That's awesome. Another thing that you speak about is the importance of, and this is something close to my heart too, if you can't lead yourself, how are you going to lead others? And that's something I'm passionate about in my role in particular, I do practice and think it's important to practice what I call soul care or self-care, because in my line of work, you cannot lead effectively if I'm not looking after myself. Everything we've spoken about, health and well-being side of things as well, but also professional development, that sort of thing. But what are some of the practices you've learned in this regard of self-care, soul care, but how important, again, is it to lead yourself so that you can lead others effectively?
Well, again, I can only speak from an individual basis on this, and I know that, or again, when I was unwell, my lead, if you're unwell and you're slogging through stuff, you're not going to impact people in the way that you want to impact, because you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
When you do look after yourself, I can never forget, and I remember going to a doctor, and the doctor I could smell cigarette smoke on this person, and they were obese.
Yeah.
And this person was giving me health advice. Yeah. Did I take it? Did I really take it?
Yeah.
And they're a highly intelligent person, but no, I didn't. So I guess that really impacted me, that if I want to have a positive impact on people's well-being, if I want to make them be able to perform at a higher level than they ever have in their lives, well, I've got to actually use those practices myself. Otherwise, that person's going to be sitting on the other side of the desk or wherever it is and going, maybe you should take your own advice, mate. And that's my big thing, where I go back to where we started, is that if, with the individual coaching I do with managing directors and CEOs and different people, I'm not telling them anything they don't know. I'm just reminding them to use the stuff that they already know. And this can go for parents. This can go for you as a partner. This can go for you, for whatever position you're in. Like, honestly, 90% of the stuff the other 5%, if you've got mentors or people that you admire, there's your other 5%. The other 5% you can get from books, or you can go and really find out about some extraordinary people. But I always tell people, deal with the rule first and then deal with the exception. Don't do it back to front.
That's great. One of the other things you do touch on that I practice in my life is just what I call secrecy and solitude, and that's simply going down to Cogra Bay where I live, sit on the water, read a book, and just spend some time in quiet. And I don't have to talk or to think. I just look out at the bay and just take it all in. And so that's something you talk about. I think for leaders and people in fast-paced environments, that's an underestimated technique and strategy, I guess, to lower mental health, or when someone's struggling with anxiety and depression in particular. But how important is that, just to be quiet and still, in your opinion?
It's, again, I gave you bad news earlier, and part of that is, there's no lack of stimulation in modern life, is there? Like what you and I are communicating on at the moment, is whoever made that design, the modern telephone, so clever. And people my age talk about young people using their phones all the time. I am not in that position to be judgmental. I used to slap, you slap for your keys and your wallet back. I just, where's my phone? So we get so much stimulation in modern life, and we're not designed to do that. We haven't changed genetically that much from when we were living in caves. And look, I'll ask you this question, Dan. When you do that, you go down to Cogra Bay, how does that feel?
Oh, it's amazing. You just walk away feeling like the weight off your shoulders, I guess, in many ways.
So that's your body telling you to keep doing it. That we don't pay enough attention to those feelings. We'll pay attention to the feeling if we've got a rock in our shoe. But it's, that hurts. I need to take the rock out. We'll pay attention to the feeling that I'm feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. But we don't pay enough attention to the feeling that you just described. And that's how much does it cost you to go to Cogra Bay and sit down and read a book?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. That's right.
And this is my thing, is that because there's no value attached to it, we undervalue it. And, we need to be reminded that, again, 10 minutes of sun before 10, all this stuff that I'm telling you to breathe better, through your nose and diaphragmically. It's all free and it feels good because it's your body going, Dan, do more of this.
That's right.
Don't stop doing it.
Yeah.
So we pay attention to the bad stuff and not the good stuff.
That's it. And I find too, people may be thinking, I just don't have time for that, but it comes down for me to being intentional about it, building habits, routines, and again, prioritizing that at the end of the day. So
that's a fib to yourself. I've done that fib.
Yes.
I've got time to sit there and look at my phone for,
that's right.
I don't know how many minutes a day, but I don't have time to sit down and just close down and look at something that's amazing. Come on.
So, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm not being judgmental anyone because I've told that lie to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. One final question on leadership, particularly from your recent webinar. You spoke about how leaders can use the same techniques as athletes to enhance mental resilience, maintain focus, and overcome challenges in high-pressure situations. So what do those transferable skills look like, and how does someone apply that to their life? And that's a big question, but...
No, and I'm going to... the whole thing, I believe my talent is not to come up with the science, but to make it accessible to people, is that what we know, and I can tell you this about yourself and everyone that's listening, your greatest achievement in life, Dan, was when the pressure was on. You didn't achieve it when you were skipping, through the fields and everything was easy. Your greatest achievement in life. So pressure's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's good.
Now, I can also tell you that your worst performance in life was when the pressure was on as well. So, pressure's just the thing that we have to experience. But if we can learn to embrace it, if we can learn to understand our responses to pressure, our good and our bad responses, because occasionally when pressure's on, what we'll do is we'll go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that's not normally useful unless there's a tiger coming to us.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's another side where, I can get, when the pressure's on, I get clear what I need to do. Okay. I can execute with intensity around it because I've got real clarity on my abilities to deal with the pressure that I'm experiencing. Yeah. And I am going to go over to the other side occasionally, but the sooner I can become aware of, look, I'm starting to get angry here. I'm starting to look to escape here. I'm starting to look to, just withdraw slowly and hide somewhere. Okay. We all do it. There's all those things we've done the earlier I can recognize and go, you know what? Okay, this means the pressure's on, so there's an opportunity here for me to go over and execute, be clear, and step up in a way that I know that means I'm at my best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And just one more thing, because it sparked something in my mind in terms of the pressure that can often arise with conflict and difficulties around that, and something you touched on as well. But I've been doing a lot of work in terms of leaders and how we are as leaders. The best thing we can do is differentiate when someone comes to us with criticism or frustration. It's important not to take that personally. And you talked about the fight or flight response. I've learned that's all in the amygdala, I think, in your brain, and it's important to switch that off so you can navigate that conflict in a healthy way. So how important is that in terms of, when the pressure's on in a conflict situation to differentiate? And I guess you've experienced that as a coach with players and across the NRL. How important is that skill for leaders and managers?
Yeah, again, I wish I knew this more at the time. But first of all, we need to understand the reason we're the best hunter-gatherer on the planet is our brain is wired 3-to-1 to see threat over joy. So that means that, and that's, look, always use the example. If I'm crossing the road to see a loved one, what do I do before I cross the road? I look left and right just to because there's no use getting across the other side of the road if I'm going to get run over. So it's a good thing. And as I said, we're not the strongest, the fittest, and the fastest on the planet. So we're meant to do that. But so I've got to understand that if I want to see that the threat in a situation where the pressure's on, I can do that. And I'll go to that way really quickly. But that doesn't that means I'm outside the elite version of myself.
Mm.
I want to go to the other side of it where I can see there's an opportunity here. That's the first thing. I need to see the opportunity. I need to signal my brain through my breathing and through my body language that I'm safe.
Mm. Mm.
And I'm gonna step up.
Mm.
Does that mean it's easy? No.
Mm.
It wouldn't be elite if it was easy.
Mm.
But it does give you the opportunity to walk into those situations. Does it mean you get it right all the time? No. But it certainly does impact the people around you in a way that you want to impact them. And it certainly does give you the opportunity to be successful. Going fight, flight, or freeze direction, again, unless it's real threat, unless there's a fire in the house or whatever, most of the time you're not going to get an outcome that you're looking for. You're just going to get in a negative loop. It'll be a negative situation, an emotion that loads you, that leads to an unuseful behaviour that gives you a negative view of the situation, and you get caught. We've all been in that loop, right? We just want to go over here and do what we know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome stuff, mate. I could talk about it all day, but we'll finish up and just a few questions on the Dragons. It'd be missing me not to, because I'm a Dragons fan. Just put it out there. But you're still in a position with the Dragons. With your role being in the wellbeing space, not coaching as such anymore, but being a part of the club, and obviously there's been some challenging times there. A new coach has been appointed in Shane Flanagan. For Dragons fans that may be potentially listening, can we be optimistic about the next few years moving forward?
Absolutely. Look, it has been a challenging time, and sometimes, in life and in organisations, you need to go through those challenges to understand what you don't want. So we're pretty clear on that now. We certainly don't want to be where we are in the competition, and there's some, and that means we can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So there's some changes that'll be made, and I'm really super optimistic about Shane being involved in the organisation. I know I've known him for a long time, and I've got.
Did you play with him back in the day?
No, we missed each other by a year, but we played against each other. But we've known each other. We've had common friends for a long time.
Sure.
And obviously coached against each other. I've always had a lot of admiration for the way he's understanding of stuff. So, and he's been through his own adversity, so he understands what that as well through lived experience. So, I think that's a part of the formula, and I know that he's going to make a huge difference. But it's not the only part of the formula. The rest of the one is that, like I always say, South Sydney have had the same amount of coaches as us in the last decade.
Yeah.
But they've been in the semis most years. So the coach is not the common denominator here. So we as an organisation need to really look at some of the things that we can do in our behaviours and in our approach to certain things to elevate our opportunity for success. And I know that there's, because I'm in the organisation, there's an open-mindedness to this and a real curiosity as to how that actually looks. We do have a high-performance centre that I believe will be finished in 2025, which is really exciting. It's not the be-all and end-all, but if you came and looked at the facilities that we're operating out of now, and then you looked at what some other the clubs have the opportunity to do, you'll see that there's a significant difference. That doesn't mean we're not going to be successful until we get in there, but it'll certainly allow us to, just elevate a lot of the approaches that we do have. So I'm never going to be accused of being pessimistic, but but in a realistic side of it, my expectations are really high for the future.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. And just quickly on the football front, I guess on the field, in terms of the play, I guess, as tapping into your NRL coaching experience, I guess for Dragons fans, the frustration is we've been on top for so long. I mean, in my time following the Dragons, I think up until 2000 and the Wayne Bennett era, we only missed the finals maybe 2 or 3 times. So it's been, the run's been a bit dry the last decade. But on the field, what needs to happen for the team to get back to competing with some of the top teams in the league?
Okay, so the top team in the league at the moment is Penrith, and they get 80% of their players through their pathways. the St. George Illawarra area is just an amazing catchment area. We need to, so what we need to do now is that we've got some great seeds. We need to make sure the soil that we put those seeds in, you know, in our development of this young talent coming through is the best in the comp. That's going to happen. So obviously when we're developing 16, 17, 18-year-olds, there's a while to make that develop. But look at the Brisbane Broncos at the moment. You know, they got the wooden spoon a few years ago, didn't they?
Sure.
Those young kids have come through together. I know that we have got an amazing crop of talent coming through. It'll take a while and we'll need to get through a little bit of adversity. But, you know, our catchment area is pretty extraordinary. But if we get to a place where we're developing 75 to 80% of our NRL players through our pathway, you watch what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're making me excited listening to you, mate. But I guess on that, what happened in the last decade that very much stopped? Because when you think about the success we had, particularly early on, a lot of the players were local juniors, like Mark Gasniers, Matt Coopers, like the list goes on in terms of the juniors that came through. So what went wrong there, do you think? Was it maybe got a bit too comfortable, or what happened, do you think, in that time?
Well, because I wasn't a part of the organisation and there's not a lot of connection to that at the moment, I'd only be guessing if I gave you an answer on that. And then when you guess about stuff like that, you end up being disrespectful to someone who had nothing to do with it, you know. So
that's right.
I guess I am a really future-focused person. And, you know, what we've got to make sure we do though is not ignore what happened in the past. Take the lessons out of it and go, well, we are, you know, because of these reasons. You know, and if we continue to do stuff like that, so that as I say, Glenn will have a big impact on it, but the whole organisation needs to buy into being the best club in the NRL.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, mate. Well, I'm imagining you'll still be involved in your position. No plans to move on anytime soon.
I'll move on when we're sitting top 4.
Okay, you're in for the long run. It's good.
Well, who knows, mate? That could be next year.
Yeah,
but again, can't accuse me of being a pessimist.
No, absolutely not, mate. Well, it's been a joy. I'll definitely be taking this into my day and give me a bit of that happy feeling. But I appreciate your time, mate. I really appreciate your insights, and thank you for joining us on the More Than a Game podcast.
Thanks, Dan. It was a pleasure, mate.